Awesome. All right. Then the next one is from success. Now, if you settle, so it sounds to me like this is an early settlement of a bond, right? So I would assume that this buyer applied for a bond, received a bond from a bank, apparently 20 years. So they had 20 years to repay the bank this bond, this loan, in order for buying the house. It appears from this instance that he managed to pay this off in 3 years. So that's remarkable. So if you settle a home loan, now he's being told that he has to pay cancellation and interest fees calculated for 3 months plus 7,000 Rand lawyers, and the bank has deducted 3,000 Rand as interest. So he's trying to understand or get an explanation for what it takes to basically cancel a mortgage bond, whether it's early, whether it's with notice. How do you cancel a mortgage bond prior to the lapse of the 20-year period?
Perfect. So you're absolutely right, Bruno. There needs to be a congratulations for finishing off your 20-year bond at 3 years. It's very impressive. We don't see that often. The first thing success to understand is obviously this is a commercial transaction that's entered into between yourself and the bank, and every bank gives you a bundle of documents with all the terms and conditions of what exactly is going to happen in the transaction, and absolutely has conditions in that document relating to what happens in the event of an early cancellation. Okay. And while there are standard practices and procedures within our law and within the banking sector for what happens in those circumstances, which I'll speak to, please recognize that it's an individual agreement that's been entered into between you and the bank. So the first thing you really do need to do is go look at the documents that you have signed with the bank that will specifically state what needs to happen in the circumstances. But notwithstanding, let me deal with just some general aspects of this particular area of law. So the first thing is bond cancellation fees. Okay, so bond cancellation fees, in terms of your question, you said there's a 7,000 Rand payment to lawyers. That's going to be your bond cancellation fee in the circumstances. This is payable at any point where the bond is brought to an end. Okay, so it's a cost that should have been anticipated, and whether you did it in the 3-year period or whether you did it in the 20-year period, that's a charge that is going to be rendered. In the circumstances, that is just the cancellation of the bond to be done by the lawyers in the circumstances. So that one, it's just a charge that you're going to have to anticipate. Okay. Then in respect of interest fees, so what would be important, as I say, go to your bond documents you've got. Okay. There is likely a termination clause. Now, practice is generally that there's a 3-month termination clause that sits within the bank's documents that you need to give them 3 months notice for the termination of the agreement. And then there's an interest implication in terms of that 3-month clause that they're going to be charging you. Okay. It sounds to me, if they're saying that there's a cancellation plus an interest fee, maybe you didn't give them the notice in terms of that clause. So please go back to your agreement, see where that clause is and what the requirements are for the early cancellation of the agreement, because perhaps that is where the interest fees are being charged. I don't know what exactly they're charging you, but you do say interest fees. So I think that's probably where it is. You also say your bank has deducted 3,000 Rand in interest. It seems to me that that's just the substantive interest payment that goes on during the course of your bond, of holding the bond on the property. Okay, so obviously remember the bank's going to provide you with a loan. They're going to charge interest for that loan that they've given you during the course of the loan, and now you've brought that to an end. So that 3,000 Rand, it seems to me, is just your normal charge in the circumstances. All right, so from our side, look, the fees that you need to anticipate, all of these are pretty normal things to anticipate. The only thing that really you need to look out for in this particular circumstance is go back to your agreement, have a look at the early termination, the early cancellation clause, to find out what the requirements were there. to make sure that you bring the agreement to an end with sufficient notice to the bank so that you can avoid the accumulation of further interest fees.
Absolutely. Cool. All right. I think that's it for today.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Bruno, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Cheers.
Yes.